Welcome. I'm Tom Watkins. I'm the president of the POA. My sidekick here is Warren Dean. Warren is the chairman of the building committee and the liaison to the ACC. On my far left in the green shirt is Jim Hostetler. Jim is our treasurer and chairman of the finance committee. Next to Jim is Terry Gent. Terry's our vice president and chairing the Planning and Development Committee. And Terry brought his own audience, his own fan club. And then our illustrious leader, the general manager, Robert Yetter. Sarah Conway is very regretful that she could not be here. She had a conflict that she simply could not get out of. Sarah is our other trustee and is our treasurer. So welcome. Here's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to talk about the building. Warren is going to talk about how we got here. Our architect, Mark Todd, is going to tell you what we're doing with the building. Warren is going to talk to you about why the cost is what it is. And then I'm going to talk to you about how to pay for it. We really do want your comments and your questions, but I would like to have you save them until we're all through. Normally, I try to take questions and comments after each presentation, but I really think it will be better tonight if we do it at the end, because then everything will be in context and you will have heard what the financial implication is to you personally. That could affect what you have to say. And so if you don't mind, we'll just wait until the end, and then we'll all be available to talk to you and answer your questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Warren Dean.
One other thing, we're videotaping this presentation, and we're going to be putting the videotape and this presentation that we're going to give on the website, so all of your friends, neighbors who couldn't be here, as well as yourselves, can go back and look at this at any time. We'll get started. We're going to cover these elements here. The main thing we want to try and be sure we're doing is giving you as complete information as we can in this short amount of time. And also, if there are people that are interested in really getting into a lot of the details, I'd be happy to see if we can organize small group meetings of the POA office, and I'd be happy to meet with any group or citizens that would like to go through details, whether it's the plans, whether it's the estimates, or whatever it may be. We want to make sure that there's no property owner that felt like they didn't have access to information. So these are the items that we're going to cover, as Tom said. Just to kind of give you a brief overview of how did we get here. Those of you that have been to the previous two meetings have seen this information, but for those of you who haven't, right after Harvey, we discovered mold in the old POA building. We had a state licensed inspector come out, found out that we not only had some mold that was exposed in the ceilings, but we also had it in the walls, and one of the buildings, literally we had to move people out that afternoon. We looked at a number of things in terms of, well, what do we need to do to remediate this? How do we, of course, protect the employees and whatnot? The bottom line was we had to evacuate the employees and we had to really abandon the facility. It just simply was not recoverable. We looked at a number of costs aside from just reconstructing the facility. If we would still be in there, we would have $42,870 that are allocated in our capital plan right now for repair and replacement of that old building. That included everything from air conditioning, re-roofing, re-siding, and so forth. The complete dismantling, of course, was not even feasible. Also, by having to evacuate it while remediation was going on, we would have had to extend the FSR contract at least 3 months, which would have cost another $37,500. So these are costs that we avoided, plus the value of the building, as you can see, was nominal. So the board, on some pretty regular meetings, decided on a new building. We went through requirements in terms of what should it be, and decided to move ahead. We also looked at different construction types. We examined modular buildings. We considered, should we use residential type construction or should we go to more industrial commercial construction? And should we consider things like pre-engineered structures for a number of reasons? First of all, in terms of residential construction, As you may know, we'd be competing with home builders everywhere in Houston right now. Plus lumber increased in price last year 41%. USG, one of the major drywall suppliers, announced a price increase of 15% the 1st of January. Also, just the skills you would need, the trades to stick build a building like this, between time and cost, it just didn't work out. The advantage of a pre-engineered structure is it's, in so many words, a kit of parts. It is just what it is. It's a pre-engineered system. It's off the shelf. You can then assemble it on site. And not only that, but it minimizes the amount of cut and fit and so forth that would go into residential construction. So those are some of the decisions as we worked with our team to move forward with. The board also said, well, what are the priorities here? And the decision was that we're not going to build this building every 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. We need to build it one time. It ought to have a long life to it, probably longer than your grandchildren's Social Security, and hopefully their retirement too. But anyway, this ought to be a 30 to 50 year plus building based on the material selections and so forth. So it'll be the last building hopefully any of us and any of our generation after this have to deal with. But we wanted to make sure it functioned well. The old building, as you know if you've been in it, is very cumbersome. It was not very soundproof, among other things, and it just simply didn't function very well. Obviously, time and cost are important. As you know, we're in the former sales office over there. We've got a lease cost there. So the quicker we can get out of that and into the new building is going to be very, very important. And also, we need to keep in mind the climate that we're all observing, whether it's heavy rains, winds, hurricanes, whatever it may be. We need to make sure that whatever the structure is going to be suitable for the environment not only we're facing now, but could be facing in the future. The board, the team has been very busy from September. As I mentioned, we discovered the problem in September. In October, we got ourselves organized. We accomplished what they call a space program. Terry led that. What that simply is listing of the existing spaces, but also the spaces, types of spaces like offices, restrooms, and so forth that we would need in a new building. What would be an appropriate space allocation for that? What would be the equipment in there, both furnishings, but as well as technical equipment? We also then did a relationship layout. It wasn't a floor plan. If you see it, it looks like a floor plan, but it's not. It's really just a relationship. Who should be next to who in terms of working function? Who should locate close to the public? Who shouldn't be? And so forth. What kind of privacy requirements will we need? For example, the financial people are regularly involved with our money. And the last thing we need to do is have your financial discussions or any financial discussions just open air in conversation around a building. So through September, October, we got ourselves organized. In November, we sought interest from firms, design construction to interest. Give us proposals, qualifications. Then we had meetings, interviewed people, looked at their qualifications, their staffing, background to do this type of building and so forth, and we made selections. The firms we selected, Mark Todd Architects, Morris Commercial, for a number of reasons. The firms we interviewed were all qualified, but those two firms have extra qualifications because of their history with the POA, with working in Bentwater, knowing the conditions of building here, and their relationships with the entire community. So this is our team. We hope that we'll be able to build the building better than I can connect those lines up there between the architect and the POA. I need to get one of my grandchildren to help me on that, but I promise I'll do that. So anyway, that's our team. In December, we mobilized the team with Mark Todd, who's here tonight from, of course, his firm, and Brett Grotchett, who's also a property owner here, but is head of Morris Commercial. We huddled up, went back through the program, went back through the relationship, organization of the building, and continued in January with weekly meetings as Mark and his team began to evolve the design, went through a whole series of meetings, different concepts, moved a lot of things around, continued that through February, In that whole period, we were wrestling with space and cost, time, so there's the usual stuff that goes on in a construction project. At the same time, we demolished the old buildings, and we made final decisions on the cost and the configuration design of the floor plan and the building overall. We also got started on our soil tests. Unfortunately, this morning we got the results of the soil tests, and we have a little bit of problem. In fact, a significant problem that I'll talk about in a minute. And Mark and his engineers have begun working on the construction document phase of the project. So in March, here's what's going on. Our plan is to complete all of the architectural and engineering drawings, construction drawings. Brad has already begun communication with subs. The way this is structured, the Morris commercial is on a fixed fee. That's it. All the subcontracts we get to see, all the subcontracts pass through to the POA at no markup. Same thing with something I'll call general conditions, and I'll explain what those are shortly. So we'll be in that whole process. We'll be beginning to set up the site toward the end of the month in terms of getting the initial fencing, laydowns, getting it ready for preparation for construction. We would like to get some early momentum toward the end of March to get going with construction. But I think we've got a hiccup here, and I'll explain that again in a minute. So with the building design, I'm going to turn over to our architect.
Well, it's good to be with everybody tonight, and we hope you enjoy the show. And but we're just my firm. We're honored to be a part of this project with Bentwater. We love Bentwater and have a lot of friends here, and so it's an honor for us to be in front of you tonight. We're going to spend a little time looking at the building plan that we've been working on, and so like Warren said, a lot of work has gone into it. We've worked very closely together, so we'll look at a few things together. There we go. So we want to talk a little bit about some of the original design concepts that we've had. So our goal was to come up, we're using the word modest building to the house for the POA. And so we wanted to be conservative with our design, and we wanted to be efficient with the expense of the building, so we've worked pretty hard that direction. We wanted to go a little bit beyond just a rectangular box. We wanted to put a little character to it and style to it. So as you work with this building over the course of time, it's identifiable. It brings some value to that part of the Bentwater property, and we also want to have a little bit of element on the front where we could have a porch. Certainly, it's covered, but you'd be able to enjoy the environment that over there where the site is. Very beautiful land around it. And so we'll begin with a site plan. Now this site plan that you're looking at is we're going to use the word generic, but it has a building and the parking beside it, which is how the relationship is going to work with between parking and the building. We're showing 21 spaces on this layout. We can get more if and as we need it. And at some point in time, it'll tie into a master plan park on the acreage back behind it, and the POA building site and the future efforts will be working together when we get there. Now we look at the floor plan, and the committee has worked very hard. Our team has worked very hard. Brett, our contractors, made us work even harder. So we're working to get everything we need in this building at an efficient size. And as you look at it, this will be the main entrance with our business office here The public will come in this door and can take care of business as they come in, get information to the POA or receive information right as you come in the door. We do have kind of a public restroom area here. We also have 9 offices, 4 on this side, 5 on the bottom. And we've gone through, we've attached names to them, we've shuffled it around a little bit, but at the end of the day, we have those business relationships with the staff working where we want them. So it's they should be able to function well in this setup. We have the core of the building right in here. We have a work area for photocopies, laying out the presentation material that the citizens get, and then we have a storage area. They have a few file cabinets over there at their POA office, and so they would go in this room right here. We have 2 staff restrooms here. We have IT electrical room here with the janitor room, and then we also have a conference area at the back for meetings at the POA office, and then we have a break room here with, it would have a refrigerator, a microwave, I believe, and a sink and dishwasher will go in that room, and enough room for a couple of small tables. But that's the way the floor plan works for us. Now we'll look at some of the elevation studies. So the top illustration is the front of the building, and we're using a gable roof system. It will be a metal building structure, and so it's a very efficient building to build. We'll have about a 6-foot cover on the front of it. We would have a storefront glass in front of the business office and the reception area. We're doing hardy plank siding on the around the building with a stone wainscot at the bottom, and you'll see how it looks on the side. Metal roof, give us a long-lasting roof that we're looking for, and then with our exterior siding materials. Each office has a window, and so that'll be a good work environment for the team. Here's an aerial perspective of it. You can see how the roof structure fits, how it all works, and how the parking relates to the front porch of it and how we get in. And we have basically an isometric cut through the building to show how the walls work with the hallways. So it'll give you a little bit of an illustration of how the inside of the building will work with a little more detail to it. There's a perspective basically from the ground looking at the building. And now we turn it back over to Warren.
There's a difference between construction cost and project cost. And so I wanted to get into some things specifically so everyone understands some of these terms. Construction cost is typically just that, what it takes to build the building per se. Of course, you can see the fees, but then there are direct costs that the POA will pay directly. We'll buy things on our own and place them in there. Now, why do we have that listed in here? Well, what we really want to look at is what's the total cost that will need to be capitalized. Let me go through some of these so we can make sure we're all on the same page. Of course, demolition, we've already done that. That was necessary no matter what we built. Site development, now that includes things like parking, utilities, the new utilities will be run there, the earthwork that will go on to shape the site and so forth. The building cost is, it's common in the industry to use the definition that if you took an imaginary line 5 feet outside the perimeter of the building and you just took that imaginary line out there, everything within that is what typically is referred to as the building cost. Now the reason for that is a lot of times when you get into a variety of projects, any kind of project, you want to be able to compare building cost to building cost as opposed to construction cost to construction cost. Because every project has different site requirements, parking, all kinds of different requirements. So if you were building 5 elementary schools and you wanted to compare costs, if you were looking at the building cost of each one, you'd have a better comparison than looking at construction cost of 5 elementary schools. In the general condition, now what are those? Well, there's a number of things that we're going to have to do that's really called support construction. We're going to have temporary fencing, we'll have temporary toilets, we'll have to run temporary utilities, power, water, and things like that. All of that is support the construction during that time. When the building is done, all that stuff goes away. So in essence, it's a consumable, if you will. But again, all of those items will be passed through to the POA at direct cost. There won't be any markup on that. There won't be any markup on any sub-costs. Any of those costs above there won't be any markup to. We'll see all the costs, we'll pay the costs of what they are. The fees, I think, are straightforward. Architect design, so forth, surveying, soil testing, those are just normal necessary fees for any building. Then there's some, oops, sorry, got the wrong button there. Go back here. Oh, now you did it, Tom.
That's all right, you're right ahead.
Jesus. Bad. Never happens. Never happens, right? Anyway, down here, these, we're going to be reusing the existing furniture. So all these furnishings are to fill out or replace anything that's either broken or in some cases we need to add to finish out the furnishing of a building. The appliances would be going, of course, in the breakout area. Then we have certain audiovisual and IT stuff that we'd have in the building, as well as financing and legal. Now the landscaping is really going to be done by the POA crew. So we'll be able to tailor and tune that as we go along. Schedule. This is our project schedule this morning at 7 a.m. About 9 a.m. we got the soils report from the existing site. And the bad news is just exactly what some of those items are. And believe me, I didn't put this slide together this afternoon. What we have at the old site is apparently before they put those old trailers on, somebody brought, I assume the developer, brought in 4 to 6 feet of just some fill. It's not select fill suitable for foundation. The soil engineer recommendation, in fact, would have to be done is we would have to remove that. There's about 4 to 6 feet deep of it. So basically we'd have to excavate a basement, take all that stuff out and bring in select fill to fill that up as well as raise a platform for the building. Obviously that's a huge, huge cost. So what are we going to do about that? Well, the good news is we have a contiguous site that the POA owns. It's all the land that's parallel to the 4th fairway of the Weiskopf that leads down to the shed, to the maintenance buildings here. Got a paved road in front of it. So we're going to take a time out and we're going to look at resiting the building on the south end of that site. So if you can imagine if you were going to drive in on the access road to the old building, right next to you on the right would be an area where we're going to look at resiting the building with the parking just north of it. So we're going to take a time out. Now what will that do? Well, we're going to have to get additional soil tests. That will cost us about $2,500. It's probably going to delay the project 1 month because the soil tests take about 2 to 3 weeks to do the field work and then produce the tests. But on the other hand, I think it's going to be much more cost effective to do that. At least that's my intuitive feeling. So tomorrow morning we're going to start on looking at that option and hopefully that's going to give us a better result. But we also had plenty of weather situations over this past, not only winter, but last year. So that's always an issue. Pricing surprises. We are starting to see steel creep up in pricing now, and of course it's not being helped by our friends in Washington. It was already starting to creep up because of capital investment around the country. And there could be material delays because of that. Starting to get demand. It's the spring building season across the nation. So we could have material delays or other things. Point is, we've tried to anticipate that. Incidentally, I want to go back here and explain something. There was one item I didn't really cover. Right down here at the bottom, there's a big number called project contingency. We don't know if we're going to spend that or where we're going to spend that. Now that's why the reason we have that there is just because of what we discovered in the soil report this morning. And probably the two big variables right now on cost are what the soils are going to be and what requirements the foundation will have to meet to be on those soils. Once we get through that, we'll know have a higher predictability of how much contingency we may or may not need. Whatever we don't spend, we won't obviously use and will return to the capital reserve fund. So I just want to make that clear that it's not like every time there's a cost increase, the budget will go up. The budget's frozen. All we'll be tracking from here is the estimates to complete to make sure we're trying to do everything we can to stay within the budget that's been set. That's the schedule. And now, Tom, since I've already flashed through your presentation, does anybody have any questions on Tom's presentation?
My presentation is now concluded, so we'll take now. All right, we're working with the project budget of $630,000. As we make decisions on how to pay for this, there are factors that we've identified that we think are relevant and important in the consideration. The first one is if we borrow money, what the cost of the interest is. It's not included in the project budget, but it certainly will be a cost that's part of the budget. Secondly, if we borrow money, what impact a loan would have on our ability to borrow in the future in an emergency. Now, let me tell you how a loan to a POA works, because it is not the same as a loan on your house. When you borrow money to build a house, the bank takes your house and puts a mortgage on it and uses the house as collateral for that loan. And they'll loan you 70% or 80% of the value, so they have some leeway if they have to foreclose. Because a building like ours is completely worthless for collateral, there will be a mortgage on it even if we do a loan. What the bank will take instead of that, and the reason it is worthless is that you could not sell it. Nobody would purchase it for commercial purposes because they couldn't get in. They don't have access through the gate. Plus, the location would not be suitable for a commercial enterprise. So instead of that, a bank will take our authority to assess you, and they will require that we would assign to them the ability to assess you in the event of a delinquency. And when a bank looks at that and looks at the value of that, they'll take a look at how many people we have or how many homes and lots we have that are being assessed, and so that's relevant because of the size of the assessment that it would take. The more units you have to assess, the easier it is to get a loan because there's more people over which the cost is spread. So what that means for us is that should there be a delinquency, the bank would step in, add up all of the fees and the amount of the delinquent charges, and then would figure out an assessment and would assess everybody in order to pay for that. That means that recognize now that if there's a delinquency, the only reason there'd be a delinquency is that a lot of people did not pay their assessment. And if a lot of people did not pay their assessment, the bank is going to charge that across all of us. So we would be paying the delinquent assessment that other people did not make. The bank also will look at the delinquency rate. What percent of the homeowners on an annual basis regularly would not make the payment of the assessment in a timely fashion. We have a commitment from a bank to make a loan, so I'm not worried about getting a loan, but I don't have any idea what a bank would look at in the future should there be an emergency where we had to go in and say, borrow $2 million because half our streets collapse, some crazy thing like that. That's a factor. Another factor is our 2018 operating budget. We know what. Now let me tell you why this is important to you. When I think of an annual assessment, it doesn't make any difference to me whether you call that assessment the annual maintenance charge, the street fund, or the building fund. I just care about how much money it is in total. One can be higher, one can be lower. The difference between them doesn't matter. And so the total amount of assessment to you is what I think you should be looking at. We know that our operating account we know that we will not need as much money to operate next year as we needed this year because of the savings with regard to terminating FSR. That's about $150,000 all by itself. So there's going to be some reduction in our need for operating funds. The next point, however, could eat that up, and that is what additional funds are needed for the reserve fund. We are in the process now of updating the reserve fund, and we'll be making some decisions on that, what do you think, the next month or so? So that we should have, by the end of April, an idea of what our operating budget's going to be and what our reserve fund assessments are going to be, and we will factor those in when we make a final decision on the funding. We're not going to make the final decision on the funding tonight. We are going to vote on the project tonight, but we won't make a decision on the funding tonight. When you have a loan, if you pay for the whole thing up front, it's paid for, it's done, and the person who buys a home 3 years from now did not contribute toward the cost of the building. If you borrow 100% and pay for it over 10 years, the person who buys a home in 3 years contributes 70% of that lot's charge for the building. Now that can cut both ways to you. If you know you're going to live here for 10 years and you're not going to sell the house, it's cheaper for you to pay for it up front than it is to pay the interest cost. If you know you're going to sell your house in 1 year, it's cheaper for you not to pay for it up front. And then finally, what impact will that assessment have on the resale of a house, on home sales, just everybody's home sales in Bentwater? I've had input from 2 very well-known, highly regarded realtors. One of them has told me that it would be better to assess one time up front, and the other one said it would be better not to assess one time up front. So take your pick. Which one do you want? Those are the factors. Here's an illustration of the options, 3 of them. Pay for the whole thing, assess half, and it could be a fourth or a third, but half just seemed like a good number for the illustration. And the third option is just borrow the whole amount. Here's what each of those looks like. The first column is the charge in July of this year. The second column would be the annual charge. The third column is the total of all the payments to each homeowner of each of the 3 options. And the fourth one is the interest cost that adds to the cost of the project. Clear?
I think that was my bar tab last week.
Well, you know something, it's an interesting thing. I think it was mine last week. As a matter of fact, what's interesting to me about these numbers is that they're all small and they're all very similar. There's not a material difference in any of these numbers in terms of total cost. All right. The formal presentations are over and we'll take questions. Now, because this is being recorded, we're going to repeat your questions. And since I can't hear very well, I want you to speak clearly and loudly so that I can repeat the question, and you're free to ask any of us, Mark or Warren or me or any of the other board members or Robert. Okay, first question.
What is the square footage and eve height of the building?
Square footage and eve height of the building.
Square footage is 3,592 square feet. Mark, the eve height?
It's 12.
12 feet. 12 feet to where the roof begins.
Next question.
Does the same assessment apply to both homeowners and lot owners?
Does the same assessment apply to both lot owners and homeowners?
We have not made that determination yet, and so I can't answer that question. We got to find another way to do this. Put it on. Here. There you go. Talking to my wrist. I feel like Dick Tracy.
Asphalt.
The parking area, the question was what will be the surface of the parking area? The answer is asphalt. Red shirt?
Yeah, why, the sales office has been closed forever, you guys are renting it or leasing it. Why not just who owns that building?
The question is, why don't we stay where we're temporarily located in the old office in the front? We talked about that. The office as built is not built of a construction that we would like to have. It is an extremely inefficient layout for us. We have no idea what the cost is, but being on the highway outside of Bentwater, outside of the gate, my guess is the cost of buying that building would be more than the cost of building a building, and we would have a very inefficient location in the process. Oh, the question is who owns the building. The building is owned by the developer.
Oh, so
Is that the Beelans?
The Beelan family owns the building. Bentwater on the North Shore. Yes.
What happens with option one, which I guess you make a payment on July 1st? What happens when some people don't pay the assessment?
The question is, how do we deal with people that don't pay on July 1 if we use option one to pay for the entire building? We have a capital reserve fund now with about $500,000 in it. The purpose of that capital reserve fund is not to cover delinquent payments, but it is available to cover delinquent payments. We have talked about whether or not we ought to assume a delinquency rate and build that into the assessment. We might do that. We just have not decided yet on what that's going to be.
Would you put a lien on the house if they don't pay?
The question is whether we would put a lien on the house if they don't pay. It would be treated like a normal assessment failure of someone who does not do a failure. You send them notices. You have the ability to put a lien on the house. You have the ability to file a lawsuit against them and get a judgment. All of those. We've not ever done anything with liens in the past, with foreclosures. We put liens on, I suppose, but we've done nothing with foreclosures. We are going to change that, and we will begin going after the people that don't pay the freight. So we have several remedies available, and whichever one is appropriate really depends on the circumstances of that particular delinquency. Question?
The numbers that are currently on the screen, do they reflect only homeowners or homeowners and property owners?
The question is whether the numbers on the screen reflect homeowners only or homeowners and property owners. They reflect everybody. There are 2,817.5 assessable lots in Bentwater. And what I did is I took 630,000 and I divided it by 2,817.5, and then I rounded it so I didn't give you pennies. Question in the back.
I have a
question about the floor plan layout of the POA office. You have 10 offices currently, it looks like, in your new floor plan. Is that at 100% occupancy rate, and does it show any room for growth? Are we able to expand and do part of it cubicles, or are we going to be maxed out?
We have one vacant office.
Question. Repeat the question.
I'm sorry. The question was, we have 10 offices. Is there any spare offices or room for expansion? The answer is we have one spare office that's larger than the others, designed for 2 people to work in. So we have additional staff potential of 2, plus we have another office in the financial group that is yet to be occupied, but we most likely will be hiring someone this year for the financial group since we have taken over the FSR contract functions. Typical, I'm sorry, what is the typical size of the offices? They're 10 foot by 11 feet.
Question.
How many full-time employees will be there on those offices that the 9 that are getting filled? How many are there on a daily basis?
What is the number of full-time employees on a daily basis? Robert, how do you want to answer that? He's thinking. Bum, 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 bum.
Everybody that's employed works every day, and I'm trying to think.
Everyone that's employed works every day. And they work very hard every day, and they work the whole day. They don't take very many breaks. How many employees you got, Robert? 9 right now. 9 employees right now. In the back.
I'm going back to that chart. The 224 includes all the lots. What would that number be if you just did homeowners alone?
What would the 224 number if you did homeowners alone? I don't know, but we're not going to do that. Tom. The question is, why have we not yet made the decision about whether we're going to assess the lot owners the same as the homeowners? We just haven't gotten to the money is the real answer to the question. So we just haven't done it. Tom. Tom has asked the question why there would be any difference. All I can tell you is what my personal thought is, because we have not talked with the board, and I cannot make a representation for the entire board. My personal belief is that lot owners and homeowners should be assessed exactly the same amount for the lots. But that's just me. That is not necessarily going to win the day. No, no, we had the vote of the people here, in the back in the white sweater. Is insurance going to cover any of the cost of the building? The question is insurance. I don't think we're going to get any material amount of insurance out of it at all. We had an insurance adjuster come through. They looked at the building and they offered us some money for broken shingles, and that was it. Part of the reason, I got to tell you, part of the reason for that is that the mold is not a new problem. The mold problem was not caused entirely by Harvey. It turns out that for years, Dawn has been going in and painting over the mold as it grew. This is really awkward. Okay. Here, put your shoulder over here. Okay, now we're talking.
We work as a team.
We do. We're a great team. Okay, what? Another question. Tom. The question is, why is the developer not participating in the cost? It would be completely pointless to go to the developer to ask them to participate in the cost because they have no legal obligation that I can think of that they should. The comment was they had some obligation to fix the problem before now. To sort out something like that in a lawsuit, Tom, would be very costly and very lengthy and very divisive. And in the final analysis, we're poking the eye of the guy that's running the country club. And so you kind of get it on the back end when they raise the dues. So there just isn't any point in going down that road. In my judgment, I would vote against chasing the developer for that. The comment was the one-time payment of $224 is not even a latte a week, and you are exactly correct. Back here. Would it be cost-effective to consider a two-story building, Warren?
No, we looked at that. The problem with that is you then need stairways, elevator, and you get in. First of all, this building is built in accordance with the International Building Code, which is the commercial industrial code, not the residential code. Once you get into a public building like that, you have to have a handicapped access, fire safety, fire life safety systems, and so forth. We did look at it, but it was just going to be too much of an additional cost.
Question?
I was just curious, why was it not replaced before? I mean, just, why was there not a nicer POA building in the past?
Why was there not a nicer POA building in the past? Because they didn't want to spend the money. Next, anybody else?
Does the building code require a sprinkler system?
Mark, you want to answer that?
Does the building code require a sprinkler system?
Yeah, we're under the square footage, we're not gonna...
No, the building is below the square footage that requires a sprinkler system. Now, let me elaborate just a minute. The issue of safety for our employees is a big deal to us. And so we have paid a lot of attention about escape routes, the ability to crash through a window if you had to. We've got doors in the front, doors in the back. It's not a big building. There are no clogged up hallways, so that the building is designed that should there be a disastrous fire, we think that people would have the ability to get out in time.
Also, all the corridors are 5 feet wide, and they're 1 hour fire rated. And we have access doors in accordance with the building code, so people are in any place in the building have dual access to get out.
Question, Terry?
I know that a big portion of the second building in the past was used for storage of everybody's house plans and everything, and we had some concern over protecting those plans. Does this building do anything special in that storage room that you have there to fire protect or anything like that?
Terry's question was the old building had stored in it lots of people's plans and things like that. And what were we doing to protect plans that were there? We have enough storage to start out with for what we have. We are beginning to embark on an aggressive scanning project. Ultimately, we don't want those files. Steve?
Just 2 quick comments. One is that, for those of you who don't know, the vast majority of what you've heard tonight has been covered in past PO meetings. So, it's great that we're all here, but let's try and, maybe attend a little more often so that we don't have a million people standing out the back door that don't know what's going on. But still, you got to come month. And the second point, and this gets back to what Tom was talking about, whether we pay now or we pay in the future, and let future homeowners pay a share, which is a fair consideration. But I'm reminded 4 or 5 years ago, and Terry was amongst the leaders of this, we had a series of meetings about what do we do with the streets. And there was a great uproar at the proposed assessment. And when that was voted down, and then a much lower assessment cost and a much lower project cost, scope was approved, my reaction in the back room, and I wish I'd said it then, but I'll say it now, is that, we're all going to pay more for this as well, unless we die or we move. And I didn't die or move since that project, so I'm going to pay more for the streets, and I'm going to pay more for this as well. So I think we need to think about it from that perspective as well.
Thank you very much.
Those numbers at the other meetings?
I go support. Did y'all say on the 5 foot overhang?
6 foot.
6?
The porch overhang, what's the extent of the porch overhang? I believe Mark said 6 foot. 6 foot overhang.
Oh, supports. What are the supports for the overhang? Here, talking to my wrist.
So on the illustration that you saw, the drawing was missing the angle that would support it. So it would be a structural porch, and the way the illustration, the way you saw that, it looked like it was just kind of hanging out there, but we've got it covered, and that's a good observation, but we've got you framed properly.
Next question.
Is this the first of many assessments to come? Because this place has been here 30 years. They've taken an awful lot of money from these people, and I really find it surprising that they haven't asked for money to build this building. Everything out here needs work. So it's the first of many assessments that we're working on.
The question is whether this is the only assessment or the first of many assessments that we're working on. This is the only assessment we have plans to make that's a special assessment. We will be evaluating the capital replacement needs, and we will be perhaps assessing some for capital replacement needs. I will tell you that before we do that, we'll tell you what we're going to do, and we'll give you the opportunity to ask questions about it and challenge us as to why we're doing it that way. We think that it's prudent to have some sufficient reserve. I have no idea what a sufficient reserve is, but it's prudent to have some sufficient reserve to cover contingencies if we need them. But we have no plans for any other special assessment. Will there be one? Couldn't tell you. Questions? Back. I'm sorry, say again, please. Is it a pre-engineered level building? Answer, metal building. Sorry, I just can't talk tonight. It is a pre-engineered metal building.
I believe, Mark, that's going to be metal siding. Why are we putting hardy plank on it? It's metal siding. It's insulated metal siding. And then the walls will have steel studs behind that with normal bat insulation.
You'll have the normal girts, insulated the framing on the inside. But are you're gonna have an insulated panel on the outside? Is that what you're saying? It looks like right?
Brett, do you want to? Yeah, it's be insulated metal panels. Those horizontal lines you saw represent insulated metal panels. It's not going to have hardy.
It's a pre-finished product. It's not a painted hardy product.
Correct.
It is a pre-finished painted product.
What's the price per square foot of that building?
Price per square foot of the building is?
The building itself is about $84 a square foot. That's correct. Well, I'll have to do the math. Divide, whatever, 468,000 by 3,592. I don't have a calculator right now, but I could do that for you right after the meeting.
Okay.
$118.
Other questions?
So, construction.
The question is, what's the delinquency rate on the current assessments? Robert? We don't have that answer. I'm sorry. We don't know. When we looked at the well, let me see if I can back into that. When we initially talked to one of the banks and they inquired about the delinquency rate, the delinquency rate came up, what, 7.5%? something like 7.5%, but that included, I'm going to confuse you, sorry about this. In the old days, Dawn never wrote off delinquent accounts, ever. And as a result, we have a significant write-off, $77,000 of delinquent accounts. Those are uncollectible because of the statute of limitations, and they don't belong in the accounts receivable list, and they don't belong on the delinquency rate list. I don't know how many people are represented by that, but those people are part of the 7.5% that I mentioned to you. It's an almost impossible calculation for me to give you today. It will not be an impossible calculation to give you after we get the refinance, after the financials are redone and in caliber and we have our system going. We will know that. I'm sorry that I can't give you a clear answer. The question is whether there is consideration as to whether homeowners would have an option. Not really. If we were to not, let's assume we picked option one. If we picked option one and half of the homeowners chose option two, we didn't pick option one at all. All that happened is that some people prepaid the loan. Two of our board members, Terry Gent and Jim Hostetler, have spoken to the board about the possibility of hardships for people that lived here in the event we chose option one. Jim specifically asked me if it would be possible to allow people to go on a payment plan if that happened. When he asked me that, my response to him was, well, that means we have to have a loan for the delinquent amount. But I've thought about that since then, and in reality, we could take that out of the Capital Reserve Fund, maybe give somebody a year to pay it. We can't make it indefinite. And it would depend on how many people needed that hardship assessment. But I think that if I had to read the tea leaves with the board, I think the board would be willing to try to work out something to allow people that really had trouble with option one and just try to figure out how to make it work, because we don't want to create an unnecessary hardship. Question?
So just make a statement. This Saturday the club is having a dinner, and if you take the dinner in the wine option, it's $220 plus all your fees and taxes that we pay. $224 is nothing to Valley Borough.
Question in the blue shirt.
And Tom and Warren, not a question, but a comment. And a compliment. Thank you to the board, to your various committees for the diligence that you have shown, the great degree of work you have done to put these proposals together. But more importantly, the degree of transparency and candor that you have shown since July 1, 2017, that was not experienced before then by the POA.
Thank you, Gary. I appreciate that. Question in the back.
Yes. The contractor's fee is a fixed dollar amount. $41,600.
Any other questions?
Just curious, privately owned clubs, the members own the clubs, and reassessing. I've been there and done that. And it was not a bad thing because we had control over what they spent the money on. In most cases, and if you left the club, if you moved or whatever, they would give you part of your money back if you spent to get in your club. Why is that different here?
Well, the question has to do with the difference between a country club, between a community that owns, where the POA owns the country club, and what we have here. That's really the sense of your question. The developer, when they set this up, set up two separate entities. One, the POA to maintain the common areas and take care of the DVRs and things like that. And the other part was the country club, the spa, all of the amenities that people enjoy when they think about a country. When people think about a country club, they don't think about POA stuff. They think about the golf and the tennis and the swimming pools and so forth. The developer had a choice when they transitioned to turn over or sell to the POA the country club. The developer chose not to do that. The developer could choose to do it in the future. I've been told that they have no intention of ever doing it, that they like owning it and want to continue owning it. But I can't speak for them. That's a completely separate and distinct entity from us, and we have no connection with them at all.
I don't see anything wrong with this, but this is, as the gentleman back here said, it's not a large amount of money. So it's just the fact that typically when you join an organization like that, you're thinking they'd be taking care of things, and actually not the streets aren't even taking care of everything. That's going to be an assessment someday. If you guys run out of money on the for your capital jobs. But I'm just wondering as to why, all of a sudden it's being assessed, and are we in trouble? Is the money going away? We're having to fund it ourselves now?
No, the question is whether there is a financial difficulty at the POA. Now, understand, I'm going to distinguish between the POA and the country club. I don't know anything about the country club finances. The POA finances are really quite good. We have substantial reserves. We're not sure we have enough reserves, but we have substantial reserves. The operating account is in excellent condition. So the POA is in good shape. We're not in trouble on that.
I'm more concerned about the club than I am the POA.
I'm not even going to take questions on the club because we don't have anything to do with the club.
There was a question asked earlier. I don't think anybody heard it, but having written off delinquencies in the past, has the prior POA ever had an audit, been audited?
The question is whether the POA has ever been audited, and the answer is yes, it's been audited every year. There is no prior POA. It's the same organization. It's a corporation. It's a Texas nonprofit corporation. The only thing that's changed is how the trustees are elected. The old trustees, two of the old trustees were chosen by the developer. One of them, who's in the back, Terry Bowie, was elected by us. The current trustees are elected entirely by us. All five of us are elected by the homeowners. That's really what's different. And the other thing that's different, though, just to carry this one step further than I had any intention of doing, and that is the actual management of the POA. We had a contract with a company called First Services Residential. We terminated them, and we are now a self-managed POA, and that's the guy doing it.
You haven't said anything about the requirement for a special assessment, and these people have never heard that.
Oh, Robert's reminding me about the requirement for a special assessment. There's a provision in our CCRs that I read it again today. I actually took it off of my slide because I read it again today, and like many of our CCRs, it's confusing. There is a provision in our CCRs that says that to the extent that you don't have insurance money to cover the replacement of a facility, that we have to assess you for it. That was my first reading. My second reading, which was today, and you and I haven't talked about it, but my second reading was, it also says assessing to replace the same thing. We're not replacing the same thing. So I could argue that, being a lawyer, I can argue either side of that. As a practical matter, it doesn't make a bit of difference. It doesn't matter whether it's called a building assessment, a maintenance assessment, whether it comes out of a capital appreciation fund that's replaced. The whole thing is, what's this thing going to cost us? We got to pay for it. Questions? One?
This is a bit off topic, but you kind of opened the door. You said
I don't want to open the door. Don't go off. No, please. No. I'm not going to go. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done it. Sit down. I'm not going to take your question. If it's not about the building, I'm not going to do it. No. If it's not about what our topic is tonight, I'm not going to do it because we'll be here for 3 hours if I do.
I'm just curious about what they're charging you for rent and temporary.
Question is the rental charge in the temporary buildings $5,300 or something like that a month. Now, we're not going there. That's the answer. Good question. Back here? Oh, you.
I'm trying to picture in my head where on number 4 that you're thinking about putting the building.
Where's the building going to go?
The question was along the fourth fairway of the Weiskopf, where would the new siding be that we're looking at? As you come around the corner to go toward the old POA office, just before you would turn to go up that little trashy road to the old office, it would be right there to your right. And then the parking lot, so it would face the paved road that's parallel with the fairway. And at least at this point, conceptually, this is all waving of hands right now, would have the parking then just immediately to the south of that. I'm sorry, to the north of that.
Okay. Any other questions about the building? We're running out of time, and before we leave, I'm going to take a straw vote of which of these options people want. So, have I got any more relevant questions to the building in the back?
So basically, the bill has already been decided, correct? There's no vote on who that you're going to build. That's been decided.
The question is whether we're going to build or not. You all are not going to vote on anything. The trustees have the obligation and the responsibility to make the choice. We just want to know how you feel about it before we do that. Let me say it this way: you got 5 volunteers up here that are your neighbors, and we're spending hundreds of hours doing this for nothing. We're not about to want to step off a cliff and make everybody mad. So we want to get a sense of how you feel about it, but we are not going to make this a public vote. And here's a really good reason why. How many people are here tonight? 125, 150 people? How many people live in Bentwater? 5,000? We got 2,000 homes, so how many people live here? We have 125 or 150 informed people. We have 4,000 uninformed people. I am not going to ask them to vote on this. Any other questions? The question is who decides how big the building is going to be, and that's the board. The Board of Trustees makes the decision on how big the building will be. The question was, do we have that many employees? The answer is yes, we do. All right, it's time. It's time now. It's time now to vote. Is this an urgent? Last question, right here.
3,000? 80? The old one was 3,008. This one's 3,592. So it's about 600 square feet more than the old building.
All right. Now I would like a sense of which of the options, 1, 2, or 3, that you would prefer if you were going to vote. If I'm going to let you vote, which one would you vote for? Option number 1, how many people want option number 1? That one just won. There's no point in going any further. That, by the way, is exactly the same outcome as the previous meeting. It was 95-5 kind of vote in the previous meeting, and it's similar here. The board will take all of this into account when we make the decision, but your choice tonight is extremely impressive to us and very important to us. And with that, we thank you for coming.
Do you have one more question?
I was just going to say, if you don't just do a one-time collection, and you get into the process of collecting
Good point, additional administrative costs. Okay, thank you for coming. Come at the next meeting.